never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd be traded in like an old car for a newer model. But life has a cruel way of proving us wrong. The day my husband, Daniel, told me he wanted a divorce, I felt the ground shatter beneath me. We had been married for 12 years, built a life together, faced struggles and shared dreams. But none of that mattered anymore. His eyes, once filled with love, now held only indifference. It wasn't a surprise, not really. The distance between us had been growing for months. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the sudden concern about his appearance. It all made sense now. I just never wanted to believe it. I had spent years supporting his career, sacrificing my own ambitions to be his anchor, his rock. And now he was throwing it all away. I sat in our beautifully decorated living room, staring at the divorce papers spread out on the coffee table. My hands trembled as I reached for them. "Why?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the one inconveniencing him. I need something different. We've grown apart, Emma." His voice was calm, practiced, as if he had rehearsed this moment in his head 100 times. "Something different?" My voice rose with disbelief. "Or someone different?" His flinch told me everything I needed to know. I had suspected for weeks, but hearing it unspoken confirmation made my stomach twist. "Who is she?" I demanded, standing up, my pulse racing. He hesitated before answering. "Her name is Sophia. She's a colleague, and we've been seeing each other for a while." My world tilted on its axis. Sophia. The 27-year-old woman from his office. The one he had described as just a friend. My blood ran cold. I felt like a fool. 12 years of marriage reduced to nothing. My heart pounded as anger, betrayal, and heartbreak crashed over me in waves. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something at him. But instead I swallowed my pain. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "So you're leaving me for her?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, avoiding my gaze. "But I need to do what makes me happy." I almost laughed at the absurdity. What about my happiness? What about the years I had spent supporting him, believing in him, standing by his side through every hardship? None of it mattered anymore. The following days passed in a daze. My once perfect home now felt like a hollow shell. I moved through the motions, signing the divorce papers, packing my things, and forcing myself to eat when my appetite had vanished. At night, I lay awake, replaying every moment of our marriage, wondering where I had gone wrong. But the truth was, it wasn't me. It was him. The final blow came when I overheard a conversation between Daniel and one of his friends. I had stopped by his office to drop off some forgotten paperwork, only to pause outside the door when I heard my name. "She took it better than I expected," Daniel was saying. "Honestly, I think she knew it was coming. Besides, she's not exactly exciting anymore." A laugh echoed through the room, followed by another voice. "Man, you upgraded. Sophia is stunning. Way better than your ex." Something inside me snapped. I had given this man everything, and he had reduced me to an inconvenience, a placeholder until something better came along. I walked away from that office a different woman. The old Emma would have crumbled under the weight of heartbreak. But the new Emma? She was done mourning a man who never deserved her. Daniel had no idea what he had just lost. The moment I walked away from my marriage, I expected to feel relief, freedom, some sense of empowerment. But instead all I felt was emptiness. I had spent 12 years building a life with Daniel. Every decision I made, every plan for the future had included him. And now, for the first time in over a decade, I was alone. I had packed my things in a rush, throwing my clothes into suitcases and shoving away old photos and mementos of our life together. I didn't want to linger on what was lost. I wanted to rip off the bandage and get out before I changed my mind. The reality hit me as I stood outside the moving truck, my belongings stuffed into the back. Where do I even go now? I had no home. The house we had shared belonged to Daniel, and I refused to stay there a second longer. The idea of moving back to my parents' house felt like admitting defeat, and I couldn't stomach it. I ended up in a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, far from the neighborhood where Daniel and Sophia were now playing house. It was nothing like my old home. The floors creaked, the kitchen was barely big enough to fit a table, and the walls were a dull shade of beige. But it was mine. The first few weeks were unbearable. I had no job, no income, and no sense of purpose. The mornings were the worst, waking up and remembering that I was alone. that he had moved on while I was still stuck in this nightmare. I scrolled through social media one night and saw a photo of Daniel and Sophia at a fancy restaurant, smiling as if they didn't have a care in the world. She was wearing a dress I had once tried on but never bought because Daniel had said it was too expensive, and yet there she was, wearing it with a diamond bracelet that I had never been given. Something inside me snapped again. I wasn't just sad. I was furious. How could he be happy while I was falling apart? I had sacrificed everything for him and now he got to play the perfect boyfriend to someone else while I was barely surviving? No. I refused to let that happen. I wiped away my tears and grabbed my laptop. If Daniel could move on and build a new life, then so could I. The problem was, I had no idea where to start. I had spent years supporting Daniel's career, helping him climb the corporate ladder. But in the process I had let my own aspirations fade into the background. I had a degree in marketing but I hadn't worked in years. My resume was weak, my confidence even weaker. Who would hire me now? That's when I came across a job listing for a small startup looking for a marketing assistant. The pay was terrible but I didn't care. I needed a job. I needed something to wake up for. I applied that night and 2 days later I got an interview. I barely slept the night before. What if they saw me as a washed-up housewife? What if I wasn't good enough? But when I stepped into that office, something shifted in me. I had spent so many years playing the role of the perfect wife, but now I had nothing to lose. When the interviewer asked, "Why should we hire you?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Because I know how to build something from nothing. I've done it before and I'll do it again." I got the job. It was entry-level but it was mine. For the first time since the divorce I felt a spark of hope. It wasn't just about the paycheck. It was about proving to myself that I could stand on my own 2 feet. And once I got that first taste of independence, I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The startup was small, but it was full of ambitious, driven people. Unlike Daniel's world of corporate suits and stiff boardrooms, this place was alive. The team welcomed me without judgment. They didn't care that I was 35 and starting over. They cared that I could get the job done. I threw myself into work, learning everything I could. I stayed late, volunteered for projects, and made sure that everyone knew I wasn't just there to exist. I was there to thrive. Weeks turned into months and something incredible happened. I wasn't just surviving. I was winning. One afternoon my boss, Nick, called me into his office. "I've been watching your work, Emma," he said. "You've got talent. Have you ever thought about moving into leadership?" The word stunned me. Leadership? Me. I had spent so many years being someone's shadow. I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. "I think you're capable of a lot more than you realize," Nick continued. "I want you to lead the next project." I walked out of his office in shock. For the first time in my life, someone saw me as powerful. Not as a wife, not as a background character in someone else's story, but as someone who could lead. That night I didn't cry. I didn't stalk Daniel and Sophia's social media. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in years. A woman with a future. Months passed and my career took off. The startup grew and so did my responsibilities. I led successful campaigns, helped bring in major clients, and finally felt like I was building something for myself. And then one day my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. "Daniel, you have no idea." He had no idea that the woman he had discarded had rebuilt herself from the ground up. That I no longer needed him. That I had finally found myself. And that this time I was the one who had moved on. I stared at Daniel's message, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hey, can we talk?" A year ago those words would have shattered me. I would have agonized over their meaning, debated whether or not to reply, and probably convinced myself that there was still hope. But now I just felt amused. I didn't reply. I simply closed the message and went back to work. My life was different now. I wasn't the pathetic, heartbroken ex-wife Daniel had left behind. I was thriving. My career had taken off, I was making real money, and for the first time in years I loved waking up in the morning. But that wasn't all. There was also Nick. Nick had been my boss at first, but as the months passed, we had formed a genuine friendship. He was brilliant, charismatic, and respected me in ways Daniel never had. He challenged me, pushed me to be better, and never once made me feel like I was less than. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to feel something more. The difference between him and Daniel was staggering. Daniel had always made me feel like an accessory to his life, something he could cast aside when it no longer served him. Nick saw me. One evening, after wrapping up a successful project, Nick and I went out for drinks with the team. "You've really changed since you started here," he said, swirling his whiskey in his glass. "How so?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're stronger. More confident. You walk into a room and people notice." I laughed, shaking my head. "I was invisible before?" Nick smirked. "Not invisible. Just dimmed. Like someone had been keeping you in the shadows." His words hit deep. That was exactly what Daniel had done to me. But not anymore. Later that night as I got home, I noticed another message from Daniel. "I really need to talk to you. Please." I stared at my phone, debating whether or not to respond. Curiosity won. I typed back, "Why?" His response came within seconds. "I just need to see you. Please, Emma. It's important." I rolled my eyes. Now it was important? When he had tossed me aside for Sophia, was I important then? The next day I met him at a quiet cafe, mostly out of curiosity. The moment I walked in, I knew something was off. Daniel looked different. The polished, confident man I had once married now looked tired, disheveled, almost desperate. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his once perfectly tailored suit seemed a little loose. "Emma," he breathed as I sat down. I tilted my head. "What's so important?" He hesitated, rubbing his hands together. I made a mistake." I blinked. "This was going to be good. I shouldn't have left you," he admitted. "I thought Sophia was what I wanted, but..." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let me guess. She wasn't." His jaw clenched. "She wasn't what I thought she'd be." I smirked. Well. Daniel let out a heavy sigh. "She was exciting at first. After a while, I started seeing things differently." "Like what?" I asked, taking a sip of my coffee. He ran a hand through his hair. "Like how much you did for me. How much you sacrificed. I didn't appreciate you, Emma. I was selfish. And now," he swallowed. "How I miss you." I nearly laughed out loud. "Miss me?" No. He missed me now that I was successful. Now that I had rebuilt my life without him. How convenient. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, my voice calm. "I want to fix things," he said. "I want to try again." I set my coffee cup down and leaned forward. "Let me make something very clear," I said, my voice steady. "You did not leave a broken woman. You left a woman who needed to find herself. And guess what? I did." His eyes darkened with regret. "Emma, please." No, I cut in. "You don't get to come back into my life just because you regret your choices. You made your decision. And now you get to live with it." Daniel's shoulders slumped, his face pale. He looked like he wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he realized it was too late. I stood up, adjusting my coat. "I should thank you, actually," I said with a small smile. His brows furrowed. "Thank me?" I nodded. "For leaving. It was the best thing that ever happened to me." And with that, I walked out of the cafe feeling lighter than I had in years. That night, I got a text from Nick. "Drinks after work? Or are you too busy being a badass?" I smiled, texting back. "Drinks. And you better by the first round." As I hit send, I realized something. This was just the beginning. Walking out of that cafe, leaving Daniel behind, was the most liberating moment of my life. For so long, I had been weighed down by the pain of his betrayal, by the idea that I had somehow failed as a wife. But now I knew the truth. He was the one who had failed. And I was thriving. The following weeks were a whirlwind of success. My projects at work continued to gain attention, and I was now seen as one of the most valuable members of the company. Clients specifically requested to work with me, and my boss had hinted at a promotion. I had spent so many years in Daniel's shadow, building his success. But now, for the first time, I was standing on my own. And it felt incredible. One evening, after a long day at work, I received a call from my boss, Nick. "Emma, we need to talk." I froze for a moment, my heart racing. "Is everything okay?" Nick chuckled. "More than okay. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? There's something I want to discuss." I barely slept that night. A million thoughts ran through my mind. Could it be a promotion? A bigger opportunity? The next morning, I walked into his office, my hands gripping the strap of my purse tightly. Nick leaned back in his chair, a small smile on his face. "You've done outstanding work here, Emma. You've proven that you're not just talented, you're a leader." My breath hitched. "We're expanding," he continued. And I want you to head the new department. For a moment I was speechless. Me? Leading an entire department? It was more than I had ever imagined. Of course, I finally managed. I'd be honored. Nick grinned. I had a feeling you'd say that. The excitement bubbling inside me was indescribable. This wasn't just a job offer. It was validation, proof that I was capable, strong, and independent. And best of all, it had nothing to do with Daniel. That night I celebrated with a few friends and colleagues. We clinked glasses, laughed, and for the first time in years I felt like I was truly, completely happy. Then as if on cue my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. I heard about your promotion. Congrats. I stared at the screen, torn between annoyance and satisfaction. So he was watching. Good. Let him see everything he threw away. I typed back a simple response. Thank you. Hope you're doing well. No emotion. No opening for conversation. Just cold politeness. His reply came almost instantly. I miss you, Emma. Can we meet? I let out a soft laugh. He missed me. The woman he called not exciting? The woman he had replaced without a second thought? Daniel. I didn't miss him. I put my phone away without responding. I didn't need his closure. I had already closed that chapter myself. The next few weeks flew by. I threw myself into work, leading my new department with confidence and ambition. The company flourished and so did I. But success wasn't the only thing I had found. There was also Nick. Our dynamic had always been easy, filled with teasing, mutual respect, and late-night brainstorming sessions. But lately something shifted. The way he looked at me lingered a little longer. The way he smiled when I spoke as if he truly enjoyed listening to me. And then one evening after a particularly long day he walked me to my car. You know, he said, leaning casually against the door, I've been wanting to ask you something. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what's that? He smirked. Would it be completely unprofessional if I asked you to dinner? I froze, my heart pounding. Nick was asking me out. For a moment the old Emma, the one who had been so broken by Daniel, hesitated. But the new Emma? She smiled. I think I'd be okay with that, I said. His grin widened. Good. Then let's make it happen. That night I drove home feeling lighter than ever. This was my life now. No regrets. No looking back. And Daniel? He had made his choice. And I had made mine. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I had thought that Daniel's attempts to reach out would stop after I ignored his last message. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks he kept finding ways to insert himself into my life. Texts, emails, even a call once when I foolishly forgot to block his number. Each message carried the same desperate tone, the same pitiful regret. But I had moved on. I was no longer the woman who would cling to a failed marriage, waiting for scraps of affection from a man who had tossed me aside like I was replaceable. Because I wasn't. No. Now he knew that too. My relationship with Nick was growing into something unexpected. We hadn't officially put a label on it yet, but there was a spark between us. One that was mutual, easy, and free of the toxicity that had clouded my past. With Nick, I didn't feel like I had to prove myself. I was just me. One evening after work, we decided to grab a drink at a quiet bar near the office. So, Nick said, stirring his whiskey with a small smirk, how does it feel? Running your own department? I let out a soft chuckle. It feels surreal. A year ago, I never would have imagined myself here. He leaned in slightly. You're incredible, Emma. And the fact that you don't even realize it makes you even more impressive. His words warmed me in a way I hadn't felt in years. Just as I was about to respond, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen and sighed. Daniel. Nick followed my gaze, his smirk fading slightly. Still trying? I exhaled. Yeah. And I still don't care. Nick chuckled, shaking his head. He must be regretting everything right about now. Oh, he definitely was. Later that night, curiosity got the best of me. I opened Daniel's latest message. Emma, please. I need to talk to you. Just one conversation. That's all I ask. I rolled my eyes. This again. Then another message came through. It's about Sophia. Sophia. I hadn't thought about her in a while. When I first learned of their affair, I had resented her deeply. But as time passed, I realized that she hadn't stolen Daniel from me. Daniel had given himself away. Still, something about his message piqued my curiosity. What about Sophia? After a moment's hesitation, I replied, Why would I care? His response came almost instantly. She left me. I stared at the screen, surprised but not shocked. Sophia, the woman he had risked everything for, was gone? How poetic. She took everything, Emma. He continued, his desperation practically dripping through the screen. I made a mistake. I should have never left you. I scoffed, shaking my head. But Daniel. Now that his shiny new toy had broken, he wanted the one thing he had thrown away. Typical. But I wasn't his backup plan. I wasn't the consolation prize. I was the one who got away. I typed out my response carefully. I hope you learn from this, Daniel. But I'm not coming back. Then before he could respond, I blocked his number. For good this time. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I ever had before. I had closed the door to my past and it felt incredible. And as I walked into the office that day, greeted by my team, my thriving career, and the man who actually saw my worth, I knew one thing for sure. Daniel's biggest regret was losing me, and he would have to live with that forever. Blocking Daniel's number felt like severing the last chain that had tethered me to my past. I had spent so much time mourning a marriage that never truly valued me. Now, I was finally free. The moment I stepped into my office that morning, I knew I was stepping into a new chapter. The company was thriving and so was I. My department had become one of the most successful in the business and people actually respected me, something I had never felt when I was Daniel's wife. I had built this success on my own. And that was more satisfying than any petty revenge could ever be. Nick noticed the shift in me almost immediately. You're glowing, he teased one afternoon, leaning against the doorway of my office. I laughed. Am I? He smirked. Yeah. Let me guess, you finally blocked him for good. I raised an eyebrow. How did you? You just look lighter, he said simply. And he was right. That weekend, Nick and I went to an upscale gala for work. It was one of those events where powerful people networked, and the air buzzed with success and ambition. I walked in wearing a stunning black dress, my confidence radiating from every step. Nick offered his arm with a smirk. You're going to steal the whole damn show, aren't you? I smiled. Wouldn't be the first time. And then the impossible happened. I turned my head and saw Daniel. He was standing near the bar looking like a ghost of himself. His once perfectly tailored suit looked slightly wrinkled. His hair had lost its polished shine. And worst of all, his eyes locked onto me like a man who had just seen his greatest mistake walk through the door. For a split second, there was a flicker of panic in his expression. Like he couldn't believe I was really here. Like he had forgotten that I was no longer his. And then, his eyes fell on Nick. The man beside me. The one who had lifted me up instead of dragging me down. Daniel's jaw clenched. And I simply smiled. He made his way toward me, his movements careful. Emma, he said, his voice hesitant. Nick turned, looking between us. Ah, he said smoothly. This must be Daniel. Daniel's face twisted slightly, like he didn't like the idea of me being with someone else. I wasn't sure what he expected. For me to still be waiting for him? You look different, Daniel said finally. I tilted my head. I am different. His throat bobbed. Can we talk? Nick raised an eyebrow. Is that necessary? Daniel ignored him, his gaze locked onto mine. Emma. Please. I sighed, considering it. One last conversation. One last moment to let him see what he threw away. Fine, I said. 5 minutes. We stepped onto the balcony away from the crowd. The night air was cool, but I felt nothing but fire inside. You seem happy, he murmured. I nodded. I am. He exhaled heavily. I regret everything, Emma. You have to believe me. I let out a small laugh. I do believe you, Daniel. That's the problem. His face fell. You didn't appreciate me when you had me, I continued, my voice steady. You thought the grass was greener on the other side. I leaned in slightly, my voice soft but deadly. But now, you have to live with the fact that you lost the best thing you ever had. His hands clenched at his sides. I was a fool. Yes, I agreed. You were. For the first time, I saw the regret truly settle into his bones. This wasn't just about losing me. It was about realizing that I had moved on. That I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And that was a pain he would never escape. I turned toward the doors, my heart light. Goodbye, Daniel. And with that, I walked away. Nick was waiting inside, watching me carefully. Everything okay? He asked. I smiled. Better than okay. His lips twitched. Good. Then let's get back to celebrating. I took his arm. Let's. Because this was my life now. And Daniel, he would spend the rest of his life regretting letting me go. The night at the gala was a defining moment for me. For so long I had imagined what it would be like to face Daniel again. To see him regret his choices, to watch the realization hit him that he had lost me forever. And now that it had happened, it didn't matter anymore. I had spent so much time healing, growing, and reclaiming myself. And Daniel, he was just a shadow of my past. A mistake I had outgrown. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt free. The following Monday at work I was more focused than ever. Nick and I had begun working closer together, and while neither of us had spoken about what was growing between us, the chemistry was undeniable. You're unstoppable, you know that? He teased during a late-night meeting. I smirked. Oh, I know. One afternoon my assistant knocked on my door, a confused expression on her face. Emma, there's someone here to see you. I frowned. Who? She hesitated. Daniel. I let out a sigh but motioned for her to send him in. When Daniel stepped inside I barely recognized him. His usual confidence was gone. His suit, once pristine, looked slightly worn. But what caught me off guard the most? The way he looked at me. Like a man who had lost something he could never get back. What do you want, Daniel? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I needed to see you. I raised an eyebrow. Why? His lips parted then closed. As if he didn't know how to answer. As if he had come looking for something that no longer existed. Finally he spoke. I miss you, Emma. I blinked, taken aback for just a moment. But then I laughed. A soft, genuine laugh. Oh, Daniel, I said, shaking my head. You don't miss me. You miss what I did for you. His face fell. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. You had me. You had everything. And you threw it away for the illusion of something better. He swallowed hard. I made a mistake. I tilted my head. You did. But that's your burden to carry. Not mine. His jaw clenched. Is there no chance? I gave him a small, pitying smile. Not in this lifetime. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. I could see it in his expression. The pain, the realization that I was truly gone. He had expected me to wait for him. To still be that broken woman who had begged him to stay. But that woman, she didn't exist anymore. Daniel left my office a broken man. Me. I felt nothing but peace. That was the last time I ever saw him. That night Nick and I went out for dinner. The air between us was lighter, the tension between us undeniable. At one point he reached across the table, brushing his fingers against mine. I know you've been through hell, he said softly. But I want you to know. I see you, Emma. And for the first time I realized that my heart, it was finally ready to open again. As we walked down the street afterward, Nick suddenly grinned. What? I asked, amused. He shrugged. I was just thinking he's probably sitting somewhere right now wondering how he lost you. I laughed. Oh, I know he is. And I didn't feel sorry for him. Not one bit. Because I had won. I had risen from the ashes. And Daniel, he would spend the rest of his life regretting the day he let me go. After Daniel walked out of my office that day, I knew it was over for good. Not just in the legal sense. Not just in the way that we no longer shared a home, a life, or a future. But in the way that he no longer occupied my mind, my emotions, or my heart. And that was the most powerful victory of all. In the weeks that followed, I dove even deeper into my work. The department I led was flourishing and my name was becoming known in the industry. Clients requested me specifically. My strategies were being implemented in high-profile projects. I had gone from being Daniel's wife to being a powerhouse in my own right. And nothing, not even the ghost of my past, could change that. One morning, I received an invitation that made my stomach flutter with excitement. A prestigious Women in Business panel wanted me to be a featured speaker. Me. Emma, the woman who had once lost herself in a marriage that never valued her. Now I was someone people wanted to hear from. Nick found me later that day, a proud grin on his face. I just heard about the panel, he said. That's huge, Emma. I smiled. I still can't believe they chose me. He shook his head. Why? You've more than earned this. For the first time I actually believed that. The night of the panel, I walked onto the stage in front of hundreds of people. Women who had their own struggles. Women who had been in places I had once been. And as I spoke, I told my story. Not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of growth, strength, and resilience. Afterward, dozens of people came up to me sharing their own stories. One woman with tears in her eyes told me, "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." And in that moment I knew. I had transformed my pain into power. Later that evening, as I walked outside into the crisp night air, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Daniel." I sighed, already knowing what it would say. "I saw your speech tonight. You were incredible." I shook my head. Of course he saw it. He may have left me, but now? He had to watch me shine from afar. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. Because Daniel's opinion? It no longer mattered to me. Not even a little. Later that night, as Nick and I sat across from each other at dinner, he raised his glass with a smirk. "To you," he said. "To the woman who turned heartbreak into an empire." I smiled, clinking my glass against his. "To never looking back," I said. And as I took a sip, I knew I was never going back. Daniel may have divorced me for a younger woman, but I had become the woman he could never have again. And that was the best revenge of all. Success was a strange thing. For years I had measured it by Daniel's standards. His promotions, his salary, his status. But now success wasn't about him at all. It was about me. And the life I had built without him. I had officially become one of the most respected professionals in my field. Clients sought me out. Industry leaders mentioned my name. I had gone from being someone's wife to being a force of my own. But just when I thought Daniel was nothing more than a memory, the universe had one more trick up its sleeve. It happened at a charity gala. I had been invited as a guest speaker, and Nick, who had quickly become more than just my boss, was by my side. I felt powerful, confident, and completely in control of my life. And then as I stepped into the venue, I saw him. Daniel was standing across the room. And he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Sophia. Except, they weren't glowing with happiness. They weren't the golden couple he had abandoned me for. Instead, Daniel looked worn, tired. And Sophia looked bored. Our eyes met, and for a moment time stood still. There was something in his expression that I had never seen before. Not arrogance. Not superiority. But regret. Pure, unfiltered regret. Nick noticed immediately. "Want to leave?" he asked casually. I smirked. Why would I do that? I look amazing, I'm a keynote speaker, and my life is incredible. Let him watch. Nick chuckled. Now that's the woman I know. And with that we stepped forward, ignoring Daniel completely. As I greeted people and prepared for my speech, I could feel his eyes on me. And then just before I went on stage, Daniel finally approached. "Emma." I turned slowly, raising an eyebrow. "Daniel." His eyes searched mine. "You've changed." I smiled. "That tends to happen when you're not being treated like garbage." He swallowed, glancing at Nick before looking back at me. I wanted to say congratulations," he said quietly. "You look happy." I tilted my head. "That's because I am happy, Daniel." Something flickered in his expression. Pain. Loss. He had never imagined this, had he? That I wouldn't just move on but rise above him. Sophia approached then, looking impatient. "Daniel, what are you doing?" Her voice was clipped, irritated. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. And for the first time I saw it. The cracks in their relationship. The resentment in Daniel's posture. The boredom in Sophia's. The realization that they weren't some fairy tale love story. They were just two people who had made a terrible mistake. Daniel exhaled, his shoulders slumping. I hope life treats you well, Emma." I smiled. "Oh, it already has." And then, without another word, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him behind. For good. That night, as Nick and I walked down the street, he glanced at me. "You okay?" I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. I've never been better. Because for the first time I wasn't just surviving without Daniel. I was thriving beyond his reach. And that was the greatest victory of all. Walking away from Daniel at the gala was the final closure I never knew I needed. I had thought seeing him again would shake me, that maybe some small part of me would still feel something. But I felt nothing. And that was the most liberating feeling of all. The weeks that followed were some of the best of my life. My career continued to flourish, my confidence grew stronger every day, and Nick and I had become something real. Something I had never experienced before. A love built on respect, admiration, and genuine partnership. One evening, after a particularly long day, Nick and I went for a walk along the riverfront. The city lights sparkled on the water, and the cool night breeze made everything feel serene. We stopped at a small bridge, leaning over the railing as the world buzzed quietly around us. Then Nick turned to me, his expression more serious than usual. "Emma," he said softly. I looked up, surprised at the intensity in his eyes. "What's on your mind?" He exhaled slowly as if steadying himself. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "Before you say anything," he said quickly, "I need you to know something. This isn't about rushing things. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about the fact that I love you." My breath hitched. "I love the woman you are now. The one who rebuilt herself from the ground up. The one who never let her past define her." He opened the box, revealing a stunning, elegant ring. "But most importantly," he continued, "I love the woman you're becoming. And I want to be by your side every step of the way." Tears stung my eyes as I stared at him. I had never imagined myself here. Not after everything. Not after Daniel. But looking into Nick's warm, unwavering gaze, I realized something. This was what love was supposed to feel like. I let out a shaky breath. "Yes," I whispered. Nick's face broke into the biggest smile I had ever seen. He slid the ring onto my finger, then pulled me into his arms. And as I held on to him, I realized I had not only moved on. I had won. Somewhere out there, I knew Daniel would eventually hear about this. Maybe through social media. Maybe through mutual friends. And when he did, he would finally understand that I was never the one who lost. He was. The months that followed were a whirlwind of joy, love, and excitement. I had spent so many years thinking marriage was just a compromise, a series of sacrifices to keep a man happy. But this time it was about partnership, about mutual respect, and most importantly, it was about me finally choosing happiness. Nick and I planned a beautiful yet intimate wedding, far different from the extravagant event I had shared with Daniel years ago. This wasn't about impressing guests or living up to expectations. This was about us, and the life we were building together. A week before the wedding, I received a message from an unknown number. I knew who it was before I even opened it. "Daniel." I sighed, debating whether to ignore it. But curiosity won. "Emma, I heard about the wedding. I needed to reach out. Are you sure about this? I mean, so soon after everything?" I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "Daniel." Even now, he was trying to plant doubt in my mind. I typed out a response. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I saw the typing bubbles appear, then disappear. Then finally his last message came through. "I should have been better. I should have never let you go." For a moment I considered saying something cruel, something that would twist the knife even deeper. But I didn't need to. The pain he was feeling, that was punishment enough. The day of the wedding was perfect. The sun shined softly through the trees, and the air carried the sweet scent of fresh flowers. I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a gown that felt like a dream. Not a single part of me felt doubt, hesitation, or fear. Because I wasn't just marrying Nick. I was marrying the life I had fought to rebuild. As I walked down the aisle, my heart swelled. Nick's eyes locked onto mine, filled with nothing but love and certainty. And in that moment I knew. This was exactly where I was meant to be. Somewhere I imagined Daniel sitting alone, regretting everything. Wishing he had been better. Wishing he had been the man standing at the altar instead. But he wasn't. And he never would be. As Nick took my hands in his, I smiled. This was my real happily ever after. Not the one I had once begged for, but the one I had created for myself. The wedding had been magical, but the true beauty of it all was the life I built after. I used to believe that marriage was the ultimate goal, that once you were married your story was complete. But now I knew that real happiness wasn't about being someone's wife. It was about being a woman who knew her worth. Nick and I built a life that was full of love, laughter, and adventure. We traveled to places I had once only dreamed of. We built a home that felt warm and safe, not because of the walls but because of the love inside. And most of all, we supported each other in every way. Meanwhile, Daniel He had faded into the past exactly where he belonged. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. He and Sophia hadn't lasted. The fantasy had worn off. The passion had faded. And once he realized what he had lost, it was too late. One day while at a cafe, I overheard two women at the next table whispering about Daniel. "He looks terrible," one of them said. "He lost so much after Emma left," the other added. I heard his company took a hit too. I sipped my coffee, smiling to myself. I didn't need revenge. Life had already taken care of that for me. A few months later, I received a final message. It was from Daniel. "I don't expect a response, but I just needed to say this. I was a fool, Emma. Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. I hope you're happy." I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I deleted the message. I didn't need his regrets. I didn't need his apologies. I had everything I ever wanted. And more than that, I had myself. One evening, as Nick and I sat by the fireplace, he glanced at me with a knowing smirk. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" He chuckled. "Exactly." I laughed, shaking my head. Guess it was true. Daniel was nothing more than a distant memory. I had built a beautiful life. A life that Daniel could only dream of. And that was the greatest ending to this story.